So I have a lot of mentors growing up in the reptile world. Did you have any reptile-loving mentors that guided you to the path that you're on now?
I had a couple of good mentors. I did. And probably the most influential mentor that got me into the venom world, which is back in the 60s when I was starting this, there were two different camps. There were the zoo, the herpetology, the herpers, the keepers, the private sector, and then there were the handful of people that did venom extraction like Bill Host and Ross Allen. And generally the venom extraction people were looked down upon by the rest of the community because they felt like they weren't taking care of the snakes, and it was, you stress a snake out when you do this. And so there was definitely a division there initially when I started this when I was 7 catching snakes. And then when I was 14, my aunt and uncle took me to the Miami Serpentarium. And then when I was 16, I got my driver's license, so I started working there on Saturdays. And that's,
You started at the Serpentarium
I started at the
at
Miami
16.
Serpentarium at 16. I think that was about 1966 or 7. I'm not good with numbers. So I became very interested in the venom because I was bitten by a pygmy rattlesnake, and I couldn't believe what happened.
How old were you when you got bit?
That was in 67. And in 66, I was bitten by a water moccasin, 2 fangs through a bag. I bought a bunch of water snakes from a guy, and there was 1 water moccasin in with them. And I took him into my bedroom, and I grabbed the bag, and it bit me right. So I go to Hialeah Hospital. They never treated a snake bite. They immediately gave me 20 cc's of Wyeth, 1 in each buttock. And I begged him to call Mr. Haas and say, hey, this is the wrong thing to do. I'm supposed to get it in the vein, blah, blah, blah. I came out of that okay, a little bit of tissue damage, but working with him and learning from him by watching.
Bill Haas, you're
Bill
talking
Haas, yeah. And as the years went by, I met a gentleman there, George Van Horn. We met at the Miami Serpentarium. Our fathers were mailmen together, and I had heard of him, George heard of me, and so we were working for Bill in 60, that was in 67 too. And then I went into the Army and went overseas and then came back. And then George and I decided we were going to build a serpentarium down here in Miami.
Wow.
And we looked for property and we couldn't find anything reasonable, so we heard Disney World is coming to Orlando. So we said, hey, let's build a serpentarium up there by Disney World. So we came up here weekend after weekend, looking for land. George's grandmother left him some money so she could see what he could do with it. So he had the finances. I had some snakes, and we had all these grandiose ideas. We're going to be these rich venom-producing snake farmers, and we met a guy here, Warren Watkins, who was showing us. He was a real estate guy. Well, he couldn't find us anything, so out of the last resort, he sold George 5 acres of his property, which is where Reptile World is today.
Wow.
And we built that, regressing a little bit. We had tried to work it out with Bill, but he had rather that we didn't. And he was very businesslike and a little bit hard to deal with business. Always a strong guy to do business with and negotiate with. And he would come up here on weekends. We'd stay up all night, the 3 of us, and the 3 of us were trying to figure out a way how to put these 2 things together. And he was going to call it Fahava Laboratories, Facente, Haas, Van Horn, and it's only that way because he tried to make it the other 3 ways. It's the only way it sounded good.
That's too cool.
And we could never get it really together, but we collaborated and worked and learned from him. And George, I was working with a phone company. George was drilling wells to eat. But anyway, we put it together and continued on through the years. And then Bill moved out to Salt Lake City in Utah and went out there several times to see him there. Then he came back to Punta Gorda and we went out there. But aside from being a mentor on the venom work, and I can go into some other stories. I tried to immunize myself when I was a kid there. We found some notes in the back building, me and Fred Wilson, and we thought, wow, we found out a way to do this, and it was a formula of how to detoxify the venom with formaldehyde so it wouldn't be so potent, and we like to kill ourselves with the formaldehyde, so we didn't do that. But I mean, this is like 16, 17-year-old kids. And I know I'm all over the board here, but this is just too much to get into a condensed conversation. Anyway, I went back to the normal immunization thing. It did get me through 2 COVID bites as I was younger, and Bill was there, and he provided the antivenom to pick up slack because it wasn't enough to get me through the whole bite. But bottom line, so we come up here, we build it, and we just stayed working, stayed talking, and enjoyed a lot. What Bill loved more than anything is to get together and try to figure out how to do a project. I helped him quite a bit with the MS thing when he was doing that. It made 60 Minutes, and Ben Shepard was his physician. Ben treated some of my snake bites too down there. And bottom line is my role in this was I was making phone calls to phone booths, and we were passing information back and forth. And Bill got a laboratory and a clinic set up in Mexico to treat MS, and sent a lot of people down there, and was getting results, was getting good results with this.
Great.
The immediate results were regaining bladder control and regaining vision, where these patients could read the newspaper.
Wow.
And I had a family member go down there and go through the same experience, and it worked. The problem was, back then, we weren't fractionating venoms a lot. In other words, we were using the whole venom, which is hundreds and hundreds of proteins and enzymes and toxins, and you don't know which one of those are the active ingredient. And then when I was over in Vietnam, I went to Thailand to look for some land. Bill was going to do a project over there for an issue with blood clots, and he found an anticoagulant property in the Malaysian pit viper, the rhodostoma venom, that Abbott Laboratory was going to process, and they were going to make this drug. And he got like 10,000 of them here while I was still overseas. George was working there. George said he was hanging them in bags everywhere. I mean, they were everywhere. And Bill said, we have got to do this over there. So he said, you go on your 10-day R&R, you find. So I found a property. I got everything I could do using some friends, Sufin and Pets. She was a great lady. They were in a pet business. And the plan was I'd come home, and my wife and I would go over there, unbeknownst to her, and set up this venom production thing in Thailand, so we could produce the venom from the snakes there and then just send the venom back, and then boom, Abbott Laboratory turned it off, just like you shut off a car. Evidently they reached a period in time where they ran out of money, or they ran into a roadblock that caused the pharmaceutical company to say, we're done. Now since then that drug has been manufactured and made. There's a list of drugs up here. It wasn't made from the rhodostomas. I think it was made from one of the bothrops and one from the pygmy. But what happens in the drug world today is they use the venoms, and they'll take out a fraction or a toxin or an enzyme or a protein and find out that's the active ingredient. And then once they get that to work, they can synthesize it. They no longer need the venom. There's a whole list of drugs that are made from venoms that people use, and you would never know it. The Biad is made from the Gila monster venom, for diabetes.
So would you say that Bill Haas was the person to help inspire you to...
Bill Haas was a person that inspired me, because what he instilled in me was you can do anything you set your mind to, no matter what it is. And I don't mean, he told me one time, we were sitting there in the middle of the night, he said, if you put your mind, he said, if I put my mind to it, I could sit down and I could study and I could go and I could watch. He said, and I believe in 1 week I could do open heart surgery.
Wow.
I mean, and I'm going to tell you something. There was something about this guy that was a little above being a human. I don't know what it was, but there was, it's not just the fact that he survived all these snake bites. I mean, he was a dietitian. He lived long because of the way he ate. I mean, he squeezed carrot juice for 3 meals a day for a month, and then he'd go eat some hamburgers or something. I mean, he was a juicer. He was very into that, and then plus the immunization. But he invented all kinds of little things. He invented a wheelbarrow that was phenomenal. He invented a way to flash freeze venom. And he had all of these inventions, and they would have all come to fruition if he could have reached an agreement with some of the bigger corporations that he partnered with to try to get that done. But they always wanted to own, 75% of it. So, unfortunately, a lot of those inventions have sat on the shelf. So yes, that's the Bill Haast, how he impacted my life.